Now, let me give you some illustrations of the amazing power of prayer. Once again, I'd like for you to get your Bible and open to Psalm 2, verse 8. And I'd like to encourage you again to underline that, because that is a powerful verse. Here, God is giving an invitation to each of us, to His people around the world. Look at what He says. He says, "Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance." Remember what the Bible means by nations? Ethnic groups. God is literally inviting us to ask Him for the unreached ethnic groups of the world. And all over the world, God is moving among particular ones of these ethnic groups with an explosion of new churches. Let me talk for a moment about the revival in Korea. No doubt you have heard at some point about the Korean revival, because it's one of the great stories of history. Do you know that in one century, in the 20th century, Korea went from less than 2% born again to more than 30% born again? Now that is absolutely amazing, because that had never before happened in history. Well, how did that happen? And the answer is because the Korean pastors caught a vision for prayer, and they taught their people how to pray. See, Korea had been dominated for generations. They had been trapped by evil spiritual forces, just as most countries in the world have been. But the pastors taught their people to pray. In fact, they built what they call prayer mountains, places where their people could go for extended periods of time, for several days to several weeks, to cry out to God. Do you know, I heard a number of years ago, somebody was interviewing one of the Korean pastors, and they asked him how this Korean revival happened. How did Korea go from 2% to 30% born again in one century? Do you know what his answer was? I'll never forget it. He said, the Korean believers shifted the principalities and powers that had been controlling their country. Now again, all countries are dominated by spiritual forces. Remember what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 12? He said, our struggle, our wrestling is not against flesh and blood. It's not against people, but it's against principalities and powers and rulers of this dark world. Well, the Korean believers started praying against those, and you might say this is what happened. They prayed a hole through the sky so that the light of the gospel could come to their nation. Do you know that now there are more than 60,000 churches in Korea? The world's largest church is in Korea. They have 830,000 members in one church. That church has a prayer mountain that can handle 10,000 believers at one time. See, what happened in Korea was that the people learned to pray. Dr. John Piper said this. He said, God has given us prayer as a wartime walkie-talkie so that we can call headquarters for everything we need as the kingdom of Jesus Christ advances throughout the world. You can say prayer is like a mobile telephone. And whenever we need help from God through prayer and intercession, He is available. Do you know Oswald Chambers, one of the great writers of history, said this. He said, prayer does not equip us for the battle. Write that in your notes, equip. Prayer does not equip us for the battle. Prayer is the battle. Do you know it's really important to understand that? Most believers do not understand that. They think that prayer equips us to fight the enemy or to overcome what he throws in our pathway. But Oswald Chambers said no. He says prayer itself is the battle. The way we win the victories of life is through prayer and intercession. Please understand that. Every time you face a major hurdle or obstacle, the answer is prayer and intercession, because that is the way that we win the battles of life.